Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That News You Care About, a weekly podcast where we sit down and talk about the video game news of the week. I'm your host this week, Trevor J. Starkey, filling in for our normal main host, Logan Wilkinson, who had a family thing come up, and I'm joined by Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, Trevor?
What is going on?
I'm doing pretty good. I started a new job this week. Things are going pretty okay for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, pretty well, actually. It's tough to stay and focus on being positive when we're going to be talking about the subject matter we're going to be talking about today.
Indeed, so. Yeah. Obviously, the big story this week, and pretty much the only story, since the news broke that I figured we'd be talking about this week, is of course the Activision Blizzard lawsuit and kind of the ongoing saga around that even basically right before we sat down to start recording, there was new developments and stuff in. So yeah, that is of course going to be kind of the main thrust of today's episode. Before we dive into that, a little bit of general housekeeping for you. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful Patreon producers do. The big story, of course, this week, I want to say it broke, was it Thursday last week? Either late Wednesday or Thursday, is when Bloomberg got out there and reported this, bombshell lawsuit. Yeah, it was the 21st, so I think that was Thursday of last week. Was it? No, I gotta look. Wednesday. It was late Wednesday. Wednesday evening of last week, Bloomberg reported that Activision Blizzard had been sued by the state of California over their, quote, frat boy culture, as well as harassment. And you can go out and read kind of the briefs, but it details a recurrence of terrible harassment, largely against women, as well as especially women of color or other kind of marginalized people, with some of the most egregious examples or elements of the case being that one woman effectively was so...
sorry. We should say before we start, trigger warning. Please.
Oh yes, certainly.
Trigger warning for
good call.
For
trigger
suicide.
Warning for sexual harassment, suicide.
Everything you could be triggered by. This has most of it.
Indeed.
So.
And yes, this in one of the examples brought forth in the lawsuit is a case in which a woman was on a work trip with her male supervisor and committed suicide as a kind of a culmination of harassment, abuse from that coworker, as well as the general culture around her, including, I believe, a holiday work party. Nude photos had been passed around of her among the male colleagues, and it's just been the latest in a seemingly never-ending stream of just terrible abuse in the industry. Obviously, this is not a new concept that we've discussed. We've talked about it over multiple organizations in the last year alone, including Ubisoft, as well as smaller studios. Riot Games, of course, had a big kind of case brought up against them. I
think that was the one
years.
That broke the dam initially for games. Was the Riot one?
I mean, that was certainly a big one. I remember even before knowing about the Riot one, there was Rockstar, the Rockstar Wives kind of stories and stuff, abuse and harassment and just kind of the culture of the industry is long been toxic. And it's unfortunate to see how little growth seems to have been made in the years in part because probably it's such a secretive industry. We don't see these things. A lot of times, people are put under gag orders as part of a condition of working for these companies and stuff like that. So
NDAs, yeah.
Yeah. The utmost gratitude, I guess, for the women and other people that kind of came forth and helped bring this suit together as be it as witnesses or eventual plaintiffs or whatever the case may be. And then from there, you had kind of the like amidst the like everybody in the industry responding and this kind of narrative started taking hold of like men in the industry being like, oh my God, I didn't know things were this bad. And all of the women I see in my feed saying like, no, we all know it's this bad. We've all tried to tell you it's this bad. I like personally, like reading through this, I was not surprised by any of this. Like it hurts and it sucks and it's disheartening and I was very angry as I was reading through the elements detailed in the case. But I was not surprised. Obviously the Ubisoft case that kind of was a huge tipping point last year in particular is infuriating, and we've seen kind of like continued little action from that one. So I don't know what kind of action to expect from an Activision Blizzard case here. So we started seeing kind of those reactions from the community and the development community and the media community as a whole online. And then we started getting like public statements from people, including like, some statements that were very believe these victims, like all this stuff. Yeah. And then others that were like, we think this is like irresponsible, an irresponsible lawsuit and stuff like that.
So the official statement from Blizzard Activision was within the vein of essentially this lawsuit that has been brought up has been has taken things out of context or is talking about things that took place many years ago. They're it's out of date. Like these accusations that they're making are out of date and like no longer actually an issue. And
I want to
complying with the investigation. And the other, but it should be noted that a lot of these statements that have been passed around were internal statements that were leaked to the press.
Right, but they were internal to staff. But yes, I do want to. So. I want to pull in here the official statement or a fragment of the official statement. They say the DFEH, which is the Department of it is the department from California that is filing the suit.
It's the Department of Housing.
Yeah, Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Thank you.
There it is.
The DFEH includes distorted and in many cases false descriptions of Blizzard's past. We have been extremely cooperative with the DFEH through their investigation, including providing them with extensive data and ample documentation, but they refused to inform us what issues they perceived. They were required by law to adequately investigate and to have good faith discussions with us to better understand and to resolve any claims or concerns before going to litigation, but they failed to do so. Instead, they rushed to file an inaccurate complaint, as we will demonstrate in court. We are sickened by the reprehensible conduct of the DFEH to drag into the complaint the tragic suicide of an employee whose passing has no bearing whatsoever on this case and with no regard for her grieving family. While we find this behavior to be disgraceful and unprofessional, it is unfortunately an example of how they have conducted themselves throughout the course of their investigation. It is this type of irresponsible behavior from the unaccountable state bureaucrats that are driving many of the state's best businesses out of California. The picture of the DFEH paints is not the Blizzard workforce of today, and it continues on from there. So yeah, fuck Blizzard, fuck Activision Blizzard, fuck that statement, fuck that like MAGA bullshit that's trying to like call fake news on this. Fuck equal opportunity. Fuck to who is it? Fran Townsend. Who came out there and basically said the same in like her personal statements, I think before that like public statement even kind of came out.
It was, so that statement was part of, so the Blizzard Activision statement in response to the lawsuit was part of their, the reason why we are only quoting a part of it is because it is a small summary of essentially a very long like response, legal response brief. Like the lawsuit has been brought against them, so they have responded in the court what their response is. So that's why they make mention to, we will prove this in the court of law. Like all of that stuff is part of their.
What I was reading was their PR response. Like that might that might be what they include as their like response to the legal briefs. But no, that was like their like PR shit on this.
Was that directly from the PR statement, or was that from? Because from what I understood, no, actually, no, you're right. You are right.
Yeah, it's the company's full statement.
Company's full
denying
statement
these allegations,
which was
it was
included as
it was
part
their
of,
statement
so
provided to Polygon. That's like they don't need to provide like the legal rebuff.
No, they don't
to Polygon.
That is the same response though that was included with their response brief given to the state of California. So
yeah,
so it looks like they like copy pasted, typical PR under like whatever.
Yeah.
I did not know that they had made that as a like that portion had been used as a statement to response to like Polygon.
Yeah, no, I mean that was a fragment of it. There was a little bit prior to that, and then it continues on after that. But yeah, that was their PR response, and their public company statement.
Yeah. Either way, it's a totally shitty response that is completely inaccurate according to what everybody has said afterwards, including what like people internally at Blizzard stated in their own statements to staff.
Yes.
So like fucking disgusting.
So like the first one I really saw was Fran Townsend, who was out there. Again, this was like an internal memo kind of thing, but it did obviously get leaked, and it was to the staff, and it was saying a lot of those same things of like, we think this is an irresponsible suit. We're going to fight this. It doesn't paint a picture of the Blizzard I know. And this is a person who's been there since March of this year. Previously, her claim to fame is she was the Homeland Security advisor under George W. Bush. So, like, what the fuck is she doing in the like Activision Blizzard space anyway as their executive vice president for corporate affairs, corporate secretary, and chief compliance officer? Fucking, she is the chief compliance officer, and she is sending that shit out. Like,
a former NSA advisor is your chief compliance officer?
HSA.
HSA? Okay. Homeland Security? Okay. So, well, that actually makes more sense than if it was like the NSA.
Yeah. But anyway,
still part of it, still part of the shitty regime.
Hers was the most egregious that I saw. Then I started seeing like
100%.
The former co-founder of like Blizzard coming out there and being like, we failed a lot of people. And this is when people started responding, being like, "This shit was brought to you before you left, and you did nothing about it." And this is when we start seeing, or like J. Allen Brack, who is the Blizzard CEO, right? Blizzard CEO, Blizzard president. I don't remember which his actual title
he's
is.
president. He's president of Blizzard.
There you go.
Vice president of like whatever their subtitle is under the EA conglomerate.
Activision.
Activision. Sorry, yeah, my apologies. Different beast, but still a beast.
So like he's coming out there with like a very, I will try and do better. We will try and do better. That kind of like very generic statement. And then we start, and then I mentioned this prior to, I think we started recording, but this video starts making the rounds going back to 2010, like a Blizzard event where, this very like timid looking female fan kind of gets up in front of the mic and asks, like she immediately kind of like says like, I'm a huge fan of the game. Would it be possible to, something to the effect of, would it be possible to design characters that didn't look like they were stepping out of a Victoria's Secret's catalog? And like initially she gets applause, and then like the men in the crowd and the 6 men on the panel, including J. Allen Brack and including Alex something, who is one of the like people mentioned by name in the lawsuit of like one of the most egregious kind of like offenders, are out there just deriding this poor woman, which clearly like a lot of people are seeing this now and being like, wow, this aged poorly. And it's like, it's fucking 11 years ago. That wasn't cool then. Like, nope. What the yeah.
I wanted to say though that bringing up J. Allen Brack and the former CEO or the former president of Blizzard, particularly, so J. Allen Brack came on board. Like it's timeline wise, J. Allen Brack came on board when this investigation was starting for the state of California. So it was always interesting to see,
in a leadership role. Like you're saying, he came on board as like the president, because he's been
not
there
on board.
Since
sorry, let me rephrase. I should have said on
least.
Board. I meant to say he was promoted to president. And this guy left roughly around the same time, like either before, a little bit before, or a little bit after the investigation with the state of California started. Mm-hmm. So they roughly both came around 2 years back And so for like this, and his statement was, I mean, as you like, you can go ahead and complete. I just want to say it is an interesting point to note within the timeline that J. Allen Brack became president of Blizzard Entertainment, like right around the same time as this investigation, and the previous guy got kicked out. And when he was saying we failed, like you said, a lot of people saying this stuff was brought to you and you did nothing for years.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a correlation there.
I want to give a shout out to somebody I've followed for many, many years now. I don't think she even works in the gaming space anymore, but her Twitter handle is @ShareTheDev. Share Scarlet. I don't know her actual last name right now. But she used to work for Blizzard, and like she's been having a lot of threads kind of in response to this, talking about her own stuff. And I mean, she was only there for like a year, but she talks about the harassment that she dealt going into the job, and then like what she dealt with on the job, and like what people she knows have dealt with kind of in the aftermath and stuff like that. So this is a like long before the kind of the time frame of this particular case. Like this is the culture that Blizzard and Activision have kind of fostered, and is infuriating. If you're hearing about this for the first time, again, like I'm not surprised by it, but seeing it like spelled out like this is infuriating, and seeing case after case after case continue to be brought up, and people keep their jobs, or they get like golden parachutes when they're shown the door or something like that. It's fucking infuriating, and it's just like the latest example of that kind of stuff. So the next kind of chapter I think I want to touch on is this open letter that the team at Blizzard and Activision, like the staff, have basically come out and said like, hey, fuck that corporate response, like this this does not reflect my thoughts. And I've seen that from like people's personal tweets saying like, fuck that noise, that does not reflect my personal values and stuff like that, to like company heads, to even like the World of Warcraft account, I think, like tweeted something out today basically saying like their own version of a similar statement, saying like we do not get in line with this overall company statement. As of earlier today, more than 2,600 current and former employees had signed this open letter to leadership, not only kind of like refuting and calling bullshit on the statement, but then also citing kind of the four things that they would like to see. They're going to organize a walkout tomorrow. That if you as a listener want to kind of support in solidarity, basically it's like, hey, don't play Blizzard and Activision games and King games, because they also have King and Candy Crush and all that stuff. Like, don't play their games tomorrow. Like, fuck that noise. It's crossing the picket line, all that stuff. But then also I believe they cited a whole bunch of organizations that they would encourage people to donate to, like Black Girls Code, Futures Without Violence, Girls Who Code, Women in Animation, Women in Games International, RAIN, RAINN. I'm not sure necessarily what that acronym is for.
That is for women, like it's domestic violence defense, like resource fund.
Excellent. So yeah, you can like if you want to support in solidarity, you can support with the hashtag #ActiBlizzWalkout. And I know people have been using the blue heart, which I'm like, oh, hey, I use the blue heart all the time. So cool. So you can do that and yeah, potentially support any of those potential charities in honor of this decision. But the four items that basically the staff are demanding are: one, an end to the mandatory arbitration clauses in all employment contracts, current and future. Arbitration clauses protect abusers and limit the ability of victims to seek restitution. We saw pretty much that same request from the Riot issue a couple years back. That was, I think, one of the things that really kicked off Riot's.
Riot
rage.
Then since, sorry, I keep on interrupting. I apologize.
Go ahead. I mean, you know the end result of that better than I do. I just remember that being a key point that came up in their walkout a couple years back.
So the walkout happened. They announced, Riot announced that they would do that they would actively go for a legal settlement with the women affected who were currently caught up in arbitration. And when Riot announced we're going to be offering this much money, the department, the same department, I think it might have even been the same department that investigated Blizzard, said actually the amount that they're offering is pennies on the dollar. It should actually be around this amount, and it's like what Riot is offering is unfair compensation for that, for what like this lawsuit should be. And so Riot just absolutely went back on everything and said, cool, we're going to subject you to arbitration now. And that's when I went from being like, that's when I took my stand against Riot, and I said publicly, I will not be using or playing or supporting any Riot product. I feel for the people who are there who say, well, things are better now. But you can't tell me when the three, out of the reports coming out of Riot, the three biggest abusers are the three most powerful people at that company still. Even if everybody else is a wonderful, everything else is wonderful, as long as the head is a serpent, it needs to be cut off.
Yeah.
I think is what I told you. It's the rest of you might be fine, but if you have a poisonous limb that is infecting the rest of your body, and the only thing you can do is sever it. It is a rot that will continue to rot you all from the inside. And I shouldn't say all, I'm saying this to people, accusing people of being rotted out from the inside out, but Riot will continue to be rotting from the inside out so long as these are the people who are in charge.
I mean, all of these places, I think that is the case. That's one of the most infuriating things for me about all this is that I have friends that work at Riot, that work at the Activision Blizzard, that both past and present. I know a bunch of people who have been through Activision Blizzard, and some of them are coming out and being like, this is why I fucking left that company, because it's shit. And those people are also like, it was my dream to work there. So imagine how devastated I was when I got there and found out this shit. But yeah, people, we have friends that work at Riot, at Activision Blizzard, at Ubisoft. It's devastating, because I know, I'd like to think, and I believe in all of those people that I know, that they're not the abusers. They're, in many cases, far more likely to be the abused, unfortunately, given kind of the track records of all these reports. So it's it always hurts, because I'm like, well, I want to take a stand against that, but then I also want to still be able to support my friends who are trying to make the change and be the change that they want to see in these organizations. And it sucks, because really what it is comes down to a lot of what you're touching on, every single head of these companies and every single management head should really be investigated by an outside third party, and basically given the most of those people need to go, because they have continued to foster that culture of toxic behavior. And I mean, a lot of it is because it was inherited from them or something, and they're just continuing it on, or that bullshit, which doesn't give them a pass at all. But it's just this goes way back to the early days of this industry. I mean, I remember what the stories of the Atari founder guy coming out and being oh, turns out he was a pretty shit guy too. Great, awesome.
Yep.
It's just kind of ingrained in the I mean, a lot of it is ingrained in just entertainment culture in general, because it's the same kind of stuff we saw. It is men, specifically often white men in power, abuse that power, and that is sucks, and it is terrible. And I say that as a white man. I when these kinds of things come out, I constantly think back to the shitty, stupid stuff I did when I was a college kid or something like that, and I play interactions with some of my female castmates in plays or something like that. I play them back in my head. I'm like, oh my god, I, on a much lesser level, I would like to think, but I did some of the same stupid shit that I was seeing because I was a dumb fucking kid. I'm glad I've grown out of that, and I, in many cases, I've done what I can to apologize to those people, and be like, hey, I'm so sorry if I ever made you feel uncomfortable. And credit to the ones that took me to task at the time and said hey, maybe don't give me a back rub or something like that. Absolutely, that was fucking stupid of me, thinking I was flirting or something like that.
No, I think I think Tim Geddes from Kind of Funny once said when the guys were talking on a podcast about all that stuff. He said, I think I forgot who it was. I think it might have been Nick or Greg who said, like I hope I've never never done something like this. And Tim's response was, you have, you have. Like I guarantee you, if you go back and you look back, you have, because, and he mentions it, like a lot of these guys. The reason they didn't the reason why this stuff is allowed to stand is because it goes beyond just a person. It goes into like what they talked about, culture. I don't even know if you can continue to keep calling this frat culture. This has gone this is an insane amount of harassment and.
That is the same kind of bullshit of like the whole Trump on the bus, like grab him by the pussy line was like, oh, that's just like locker room talk. Like fuck that.
I've been in a lot of locker rooms.
That is
People
abuse.
Don't talk like that.
that is abuse. That is harassment. Like that's what it is. But like people want to write that off as boys will be boys. It's like, no, fuck that noise. Like
no.
Like boys should be better. Like that is if boys will be boys, then like boys don't deserve to be. But yeah, so I think
it's super hyper predatory behavior that I was talking to my aunt Duffy over the weekend. This stuff came up and I said, I used to look at things and be like, man, those guys are the outliers, and then I realized, oh shit, we're the outliers. Like. I would love to be here and stand here and say, listen, like not all men, not all guys are like this. Not like this doesn't always have to happen. Like, like in all those reasons I would love to give, but the reality of the situation and the facts don't lie. Like this is no longer anecdotal. It is, we are past that point. This is statistical, factual evidence is shown that in these positions, in these corporations, men, if a culture is allowed to grow, like a mold, like an infection infesting your culture, if you allow this toxic bullshit to latch itself on, if women don't, and this is, I don't mean to put women on the spot here, but if women don't speak up, if men especially don't speak up on behalf of the women who are trying to speak up or who are afraid to speak up, you allow it to grow. It is no longer okay to be like, well, I wasn't doing it at the time, but like I didn't want to say anything. That's over. If you see something, say something. If you see something wrong, you have to stand up and say something. It is done. We are done with this. Your culpability is real.
Yeah.
You are culpable for the inaction that you did not take. And I look back on looking back on my past, it's a combination for sure of, one, I'm abrosexual. I am not I'm never 100% anything. My where I come from a lot of times varies, especially when I look back on previous trying to be flirtatious and having no concept of where a line might even need to be. Luckily, I had I shouldn't say need to be. I knew where certain lines definitely were when it comes to flirtation, but I definitely crossed those lines out of just ineptitude and social interaction and adequacy. But even beyond that, I look back and I'm ashamed of the times when I heard something or I saw something that was at the time I was like, well, it's just one guy being an asshole, right? It's just one guy being an asshole saying something that he shouldn't be saying. And we're all going to shake our heads and be like, dude, that's not cool. But none of us are going to stand up and say, hey, you need to apologize.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you need to check yourself. And if you refuse to, I'm taking this to HR. Beyond that, because as we have constantly found out, HR is useless.
I was going to say the other stories I think about are when I worked at a theater, and on my first day I went to the head of HR for the orientation kind of thing, and we're going through the employee manual, and he basically a direct quote was, oh, and here's the sexual harassment section, but we'll skip that because it's a theater. Ha 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 ha. And I
that's not funny.
No.
That's not funny at all.
He as a gay man, he's making a joke in theater and all that stuff, and sure enough, at that
Kevin Spacey. Holy
I mean,
shit.
yes, at that theater, like there were rampant sexual assault and sexual harassment cases, like on the regular. The women who ran in the development department and ran like the gala events and stuff like that were constantly being harassed by drunk, misogynistic board members and shit like that. The heads of the organization who would throw like opening night cast parties at their house, and they were, you know, a gay couple, which was a whole other like, that's an issue of like the the heads of the company are like intertwined like that. But they would throw opening night parties, and they would get drunk and make out with anybody that was there. And like there was part of me in the back of my head that was always like, I dare you to try and kiss me, because I will fight this, and I will like I will take that quote from day one and milk this nonprofit for whatever money I can get out of it before I bounce the fuck off. But yeah, it was like, it was disgusting, and I, you know, it that was an element of what led me to walk away from that job. Was like seeing just the continued harassment in that industry. And so it sucks then that I, you know, basically leave theater behind and come into and, you know, theater has its own much more broad issues in that same realm, as you mentioned, like Kevin Spacey and stuff like that. But then it sucks that like I come into gaming, and like over the last 6 years, my eyes continue to get opened to this kind of shit, more and more, and it's like infuriating that like I can't escape it. But like, I say that it's infuriating for me. I'm not the one dealing with anywhere near the
Yeah.
harassment that like any of our friends or peers, or just nobody should be dealing with the harassment that women in this industry, people of color in this industry, are dealing with, and it is infuriating. And
Period.
like I constantly, like I the first couple days as this story was breaking, I was very much like, I don't want to just put out like a, you know, a quote performative tweet or something like that saying like I stand with, you know, the victims and all this, because of fucking course I do. But also, I'm like the last voice you need in this. Hey, I have no power in this industry. Nobody gives a fuck who I am. So like, what the hell is me piling into this going to do, apart from maybe my friends that see it in the feed know that, or like I would hope that they know already that I'm like, I have their back and stuff like that. But like, I would I would much rather give the platform and step back and give the platform to the people that need this platform right now. And it's not me. I don't need this. Like we're talking about it on this podcast, of course, that'll go live, but like of course I stand in solidarity with the you know, unfortunate workers who are being abused, both at Activision Blizzard but all across the industry. And you know, it's the kind of thing, I, again, as we kind of touched on, like I feel immense shame for the times I haven't stood up when I should have, when I've seen those kinds of things in gaming, outside of gaming, in whatever field I've been. But yeah, it's I also don't want to sit there and be like, I don't know what to do, because of course I can go out and support many of these causes that are coming out, and I do. I support a lot of these causes that are out there, but I've already been doing that. There's nothing new that I'm doing
Yeah.
out of this news. I mean, we touched on this a little bit, I think, before we started recording. I'm not the Activision Blizzard guy here. Like, I don't play the Call of Duties. I mean, I was like tempted to pick up Call of Duty this year because, of course, we've got some friends that are working on the game, which, again, like, it sucks that they're getting all caught up in this. I might have checked out the Diablo 2 remake, but I'm not going to be terribly distraught if I skip out on those, compared to someone like you that is, you know, our Overwatch League guy. We've got you and Logan both play Warzone on the regular. You used to play Warcraft. You and, like, I mean, everybody but me loves Tony Hawk Pro Skater. So like, I'm the one of our team that, hey, I wasn't going to be playing most of these Activision Blizzard games anyway. So me boycotting them isn't like really an act of protest so much as that was just going to be my norm. So I don't know if you want to weigh in that. I do want to, like, I've still got the next three items that the fans are kind of, or the, not the fans, but the former and current workers are kind of demanding, but I want to give you a chance if you want to touch on like you being the more Activision Blizzard focused guy, or one of the more active people. Like, that's the reason you wanted to hop on the show today, even before Logan had to drop. It was gonna be like the three of us talking about this. So anything you want to add into that regard?
The thing where I'm at with this is I am unfathomably disheartened and sad. And I say that not out of like what has happened there, but out of my reaction to what has happened there. Because I am numb. I am numb from what is going on. I am reading it. I understand it. I know the emotional impact it should be having on me, and it does not. And I am so disheartened and sad over that at this point in time it has happened so often, and it just keeps happening that, like I said, I mentioned it earlier, like we're outliers in this, and I don't think you can get away from this. You left theater to come to games, and it's happening here now. I don't think it ever leaves. I don't think like this is such a bigger cultural issue.
Oh yes, yeah.
In like just human culture, and I don't know how. Like I'm at a total loss about my like, as somebody who normally when I see something wrong, or let me rephrase it. When I see something that's broken, my initial thought is, well, how can we fix this? I have been at a loss about how we fix any of this for years.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how long it's been.
I mean, the problem there is like we can't fix this. Like very little we can do, even if we organize these boycotts and like don't like hit them with their wallet or like that. None of that matters. Like none of that is going to have an effect on Bobby Kotick leaving the company. None of that. Like the change needs to happen from within those organizations, and it needs to happen from the top down. And the problem is that the top down, or like those are the people in power, they're not interested in upsetting the status quo and changing things to be more, receptive to this kind of stuff. Yeah. So like the only people that have the power to make the changes that need to be made, like aren't inclined to do so. And like the rest of us just kind of have to look on and be like, well, that fucking sucks.
Yeah. And the only thing and so this is where I'm kind of at with it is, and that's why I wanted to come on and talk about this, is because like I have my draft tweets are full of tweets wanting to voice my support, wanting to say something, and just realizing that like the best thing I can do is retweet and help provide platforms for people who have something to say about this. But one thing I wanted to say about it, like on this podcast especially, is I have gotten to the point of being numb to this sort of news, because I now have an expectation that whatever industry it is, whatever it is, like it has this problem in it somewhere. And part of what needs to happen is that when we see these parts, when we find these parts, we purge them if we can. And I think what you nailed it on its head with Bobby Kotick. Bobby Kotick is a notorious scumbag. He has been connected to freaking Jerry Epstein. Like his stuff is on in Jerry Epstein's little black book. Bobby Kotick's information is in there, right next to some other pretty prominent figures.
I don't think Jerry's the right name.
Jerry, what am I thinking of? What is it?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
I was like, wait, that something is amiss about that.
Jeffrey
Epstein. Yes.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein's little black book has Bobby Kotick's name in it. Bobby Kotick took time to go to his pedophile island. That's the kind of man this is. This is a man who has notoriously strategically laid off swaths of people from Blizzard, a division that was making massive profits and had record profits, and in order to maximize profits, laid off over 100 people in an afternoon on a split decision. Once the bean counters counted everything up and said, well, actually, if you do this, then you're going to be able, then the board members and everybody are going to be able to make more money. Yeah. Well,
laying on, it has become kind of their MO almost to is there an investor call? There's probably going to be layoffs tied up to that day, which to a degree, there's a broken element of our system that they can't give advance notice on that because, it could influence insider trading and shit like that. But there's also that is constant. I've lost track of the stories that are, while he is promoting on those investor calls, highest earnings ever, like people are boxing up their belongings because they've been laid off hours before, and it is infuriating and disgusting. And he walks away with a fucking $144 million bonus or some shit like that.
The man is a billionaire. The man is it is outright disgusting, like who this person is, and the fact that he is in charge of, like, my backstory with Blizzard. It goes back to I was 6 or 7 years old. My brother, in order to lie to my parents that he didn't leave me alone to go hang out with his friends when he was supposed to be babysitting me, asked what I needed, like what I wanted, and I told him I wanted to play. Because I was looking through the Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2 manuals, like incessantly, because they had dragons and orcs and all sorts of cool stuff, artwork in them, story element stuff was going on. And I was super fascinated with it, and I wanted to play the guys who had the dragons. And so my brother taught me how to play Warcraft, like Warcraft 1, because he said, "Do you want to play 1 or 2?" And I said, "Well, 1, obviously, because I wanted to start from the beginning." Huda. And that's my starting. That's the first time I ever touched a Blizzard product. And, well, before I even touched the product itself, the manual was this awesome thing that I found myself drawn to, and just thought it was like the coolest thing.
That, I mean, to that, like, yeah, I going way back that far. Yes, I played Warcraft 1, 2, 3. I played, Diablo 1 and 2 in those, like, back in the day when I was a PC gamer. I played that, and then they made the jump to World of Warcraft, and I never really got into StarCraft either. But yeah, like that was pretty much like my early lineage with Blizzard in those days. I mean, I've definitely been in the Activision Blizzard realms. I just am not much these days. So,
and the thing is, I've continued to like Warcraft 1 through 3, Frozen Throne expansion. Heck, I played the PS1 expansion for like the on Stranger Tides or whatever, on Black Tides or whatever. I think on Stranger Tides is a Pirates of the Caribbean.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I was like, I'm pretty sure that one's wrong too. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I played through all of this stuff, and like played through StarCraft 1, StarCraft Brood War. I didn't pick up StarCraft 2, but my brother did, and like he was super into it. Like, Blizzard has been an Abbott family gaming company. Like, it is something that we have gone to time and time again on numerous occasions for numerous games. I did everything I could to hustle and connive my way into getting a regular World of Warcraft subscription so I could play it. I played World of Warcraft from like soon after, like first patch after Burning Crusade launched, up until like right before Mists of Pandaria came out. Like, I played, and I was a dedicated monthly player, like monthly subscriber for years to that game, and I still have incredibly fond memories. And Overwatch, I can't even begin to go into how much Overwatch has like changed my life. Like, my love and passion for this game and the league around it is such a massive part of my life. And like to the point where I have to say now, like, I can't support it anymore. I can't in any good conscience support it. Now, like, granted, this has kind of been a long time coming, especially since, like, my dreams of ever working at Blizzard were dashed, because for a short period of time, you could Google my name and J. Allen Brack's name together, and you were going to see an image that I made of him as a treasure goblin from Diablo 3, where I wrote an article about how, in order to cover up and deal with the backlash from the Free Hong Kong issue with Blitzchung and everything like that happened with Hearthstone, and in regards to the Hong Kong protests, I wrote an article basically lambasting, saying Blizzard is bribing us. Blizzard is bribing us. And I said, and we're going to bite it hook, line, and sinker. But I don't know, and I think that this is kind of the biggest point here now, is you have somebody who's like a longtime Blizzard loyalist, longer than even I am, Asmongold, who is notoriously known for kind of having a bit of an anti-SJW kind of like attitude towards stuff.
Remind me, he's the one we talked about on that Nerdy Site show, where he's the one that like played WoW forever and then recently hopped over to Final Fantasy 14, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's that guy, and he has gone out
I've seen him in the replies on a lot of these like tweets about like, all right, but fucking do something about the harassment.
Yeah, he has also always been. I think one of my favorite things is he goes, like everybody should be given the presumption of innocence, innocent before proven guilty in a court of law, but I'm not a court of law, and he gives that, which is a very like. He has often been on the side of like we need to be cautious about it because and he has his own reasons for it. I'm not going to get into it here because I don't believe in that. In regards to like accusations, but him coming down on this and saying like definitively like something needs to change, I think says that there is a wider spectrum now than ever of people on various different points of your feelings about accusations, quote unquote accusational performance, people who perform, like you mentioned, you don't want to create a tweet that could be seen as a performative tweet to try to just be like, well, this is my stance, and it's like, well, if people follow you, they should know your stance already. I feel like they're strongly like Asmongold, especially, is somebody who has a like very deep following that him saying something actually I think makes an impact, matters. Versus like if you or I said something and it would just basically people could easily see that as us just patting ourselves on the back for being like, well, aren't we good allies to the women folk? Mm-hmm. And I want to see change out of this. I want to see it be better. I think that not even Riot could take all of this, but even Riot was still able to like renege on everything, and is
and nobody
still
cares.
like, nobody cares. Nobody cares that Riot is still screwing over 3 women by trying to force arbitration clauses now, and like it doesn't matter to them. They'll still play Valorant. They'll still play. Everybody's super hyped up and talks about League all the time, and it's just like I don't know how you can do this. Like, especially some people that I know who work at specific companies that are also encountering this. I don't know how you publicly endorsing a company that is also going like having these issues, and like I said, at the end of the day, the 3 people who are in charge of Riot Games on all their properties, the 3 people who are in charge of it, are the 3 of the worst offenders out of that Riot report. And if we don't see a much more stringent action, now I think there was recently, right before we started recording, Bobby Kotick on an investor call.
Yeah, I was gonna.
You're gonna get to that later.
Yeah,
then
I was gonna circle around.
I'll kibosh what I was gonna say to that. We'll get to that later then.
Yeah.
But there has to be ramifications out of this. And really, that's where I come down on. Like, I am so numb to this, and I can't even, like, I'm angry now. I'm steamed and I'm angry. I'm working myself up over this for good reasons. But I'm working myself up over this because I don't feel anything about it. And I should. These are some of the worst, absolute worst stuff we've seen come out after, like, in the post, like, Me Too era. Like, a woman took her own life. And then the corporation that shielded her abusers and shielded her harassers had the audacity to say, how dare the state try to use it as evidence of bad things? Don't they have any, like, concept of, like, for her, like, don't they have any compassion for her family? And it's like, how, like, the audacity you have to make a statement like that when you have done nothing to help women in her same situation is absolutely deplorable. And, let's wrap up what the other 3 demands are, and then I'll share like what I think really needs to happen.
Yeah. So circling back around to that. So again, I said it a while ago, and want to restate it. So the first point was they want an end to the mandatory arbitration. The second point was the adoption of recruiting, interviewing, hiring, and promotion policies designed to improve representation among employees at all levels, agreed upon by employees in a company-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion organization. Current practices have led to women, in particular women of color and transgender women, non-binary people, and other marginalized groups that are vulnerable to gender discrimination, not being hired fairly for new roles when compared to men. Number 3, publication of data on relative compensation, including equity grants and profit sharing, promotion rates, and salary ranges for employees of all genders and ethnicities at the company. Current practices have led to aforementioned groups not being paid or promoted fairly. And then number 4, empower a company-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion task force to hire a third party to audit ABK's, what is it, Activision Blizzard King's reporting structure, HR department, and executive staff. It is imperative to identify how current systems have failed to prevent employee harassment and to propose new solutions to address these issues. A couple of those strike me as like particularly frustrating because diversity, equity, and inclusion feels like it has just been like the buzzword in the corporate space in this like in the Me Too era, and it feels like it's thrown out there with no action behind it ever. It's I mean the some of the cases bring up the idea that like HR investigated these things and nothing came of it. I want to highlight a case that we've talked about on the show as well, Scavenger Studio. So it's not even like, big studio stuff. It is like all across the industry, even indie studios kind of deal with this stuff. We touched on, months back, great reporting by Rebecca Valentine, talking about Scavenger Studio, the team behind the upcoming game season that like a whole bunch of us were very excited about coming out of PAX East last year. Like the CEO and creative director of that were in a relationship, and the CEO being the female in that relationship, the creative director being reportedly an abusive male figure in that organization within that company. Like again, another case of like the people at the top in power weren't inclined to do anything. They brought in, a third party, but at that point, the people that have already been affected by this are gone. So the third party isn't finding anything in their current culture now that all eyes are on them. And so like eventually the guy was, like the guy who had been put on, leave or whatever was brought back in. I don't think he's like creative director at the studio anymore, but he still has like a position within the studio and likely a position of power. And the woman's still the CEO of that company. And so it's like, well, that fucking did nothing. Diversity, equity, inclusion didn't really help that much. An investigation, an HR investigation didn't really help that much in that case. Fucking fuck. So like seeing it here, I mean, I remember at multiple jobs I've had in the last, number of years, diversity, equity, inclusion coming up at like company retreats and like this is something we're really going to prioritize, and then nothing comes of it. And it's infuriating seeing that and seeing like I remember fucking I'm not there anymore, I don't care, but like I remember being at the Symphony last year as all the Black Lives Matter stuff was going on and people being like, hey, I think we should weigh in on this. I'm like, hey, as a white guy, I'm looking around our Zoom calls and noticing that there are no people of color in this organization. So what the fuck are we going to say? And like going to like expanding that out to like the makeup of the symphony. There were like, I think 2 or 3 people of color, either in the symphony itself, like in the orchestra or on the board. Like it was a very white organization. And so I was basically like, hey, we shouldn't be saying anything about this unless it's going to be, hey, we recognize we've failed as well and are going to put things in place. And they went out with some generic Martin Luther King quote, and I was just like, fuck this place. Jeez. So like I loathe seeing that, just because I have not been given any reason to believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives will actually impact an organization. I wish they do. I hope they do. I hope in this case, I hope the people that are signing this open letter to the leadership of Activision Blizzard get these things and more, and actually impact change. But I'm not like I don't want to be Charlie Brown, like going to kick the football that the game industry is holding and yanks out from under us yet again. So all that said, right before we started recording, I just wanted to...
I want to say before we move on from that, I want to mention, if you want to have any more faith in like what Trevor is saying about like how this stuff is a buzzword, etc., in her own statement to the staff,
Fran Townsend?
Fran Townsend, yeah. I almost called her Francel Townsend, but Fran Townsend legitimately starts her statement off saying, as the executive sponsor of the ABK Employee Women's Network. Mm-hmm. That's a diversity group within ABK within Activision Blizzard King. That, like, right there. And then she goes on to support the statement that, like, this is a meritless lawsuit, etc. Like, everything she says echoes the support for the way things are, and her saying things aren't bad. We do have a good culture, etc.
This isn't the Activision Blizzard I know. That kind of stuff. And again, reinforcing you've been there for 4 months. Like,
but she even says, I'm the executive sponsor of ABK, Employee Women's Network.
Mm-hmm.
If you need any more evidence that just using these organizations can be used as a cover for bad behavior happening and being like, no, it doesn't happen, we have this organization in our group, that is a foundational problem right there, is because you're asking people, because what you are going to see during any sort of like agreement to something like this is you're going to have quote unquote executive sponsors who will manipulate and control like that group. It has to remain in, like, you cannot, and this, I cannot emphasize this enough, you have to use this as an opportunity to at least begin the start towards unionization, because that's the only way, by having the control of these organizations solely within non-management positions, that's the only way that you're going to see this, like, actually take effect. Mm-hmm. Is it has to remain within the power of you as the workers. Like, that's how it has to be if you want to see it successful.
Yeah, so right before we started recording, it broke that Bobby Kotick, CEO of Activision Blizzard, wrote out a letter. It was posted to kind of their investor portal, and it is a letter from CEO Bobby Kotick to all employees, and was made public in large part probably because it wasn't the lawsuit breaking that caused the stock price to dip, but it was all of the employees coming out and saying, we do not stand by the statements of the executive leadership that caused the stock price to dip. So that, of course, brings Bobby Kotick into action. So yes, he writes, or somebody on his PR team writes, I don't know. This has been a difficult and upsetting week. I want to recognize and thank all of those who came forward in the past and in recent days. I so appreciate your courage. Every voice matters, and we will do a better job of listening now and in the future. Our initial responses to the issues we faced together and to your concerns were, quite frankly, tone deaf. Again, they were your team's own responses, either from other executive leadership or from the marketing people behind it. So, like, they were presented in the exact tone that your team signed off on.
That you yourself probably, like, there's no way Bobby Kotick did not sign off at least a part of it. Like, I guarantee you,
if he didn't, then it's the same thing I bring up when we talk about Yves Guillemot over at Ubisoft. Like, if he didn't, then he's negligent and should be removed from power. And if he did, and has supported and kind of fostered this environment, he's abusive and should be removed from power. Like, all of them, remove all of them from power, basically.
Yep.
Eat the
I want to say,
rich. Basically, they touch on, in his statement, he just touches on we're a lot of, again, generic buzzword. I don't believe they have. I believe somebody pointed out that, like, of the 4 requests that we talked about that the employers are looking for, only one of the things that Kotick is committing to really lines up with that, and it appears to be like the hey, we're gonna look at our hiring practices element, because he mentions earlier this year I sent an email requiring all hiring managers to ensure that they have diverse candidate slates for all open positions. We will be adding a compliance resources to ensure that our hiring managers are in fact adhering to this directive. So that seems to be the only thing they're promoting that lines up with what the team is requesting.
Didn't he say that they're also hiring a law firm to look at practices?
So they have. We encourage anyone with experience you believe violates our policies to use our existing channels or reach out to Stephanie Avakian, who's a member of the management team at Wilmer Hale. So yes, he has asked the law firm Wilmer Hale to conduct a review of our policies and procedures. So I don't know if that. I mean, that doesn't sound like a third party relationship. That sounds like, hey, CEO buddy is talking to his lawyer buddies to come in and give us the cover we need. And again, I say that not wanting to be cynical, but having seen shit like that enough to know that that's exactly what's going on. That somebody at WilmerHale is probably on the board of Activision Blizzard and offering this as like a pro bono kind of like service. So yes, but yes,
Oh, geez, they are.
or
They
they
are.
are the the law firm of Activision Blizzard. I would not be surprised by that either. So yeah, there's this idea of like, hey, that's not a that is a direct conflict of interest if if this guy is, you know, working on that kind of stuff.
They are litigate like so. It is a litigation law firm,
Mm-hmm.
which means these are not. How do I put this? They are known like
They're not on they will not be working on behalf of the employee, much like
no.
HR is not going to be working on behalf of the employee.
They're
So
100% in line with like this is 100% in line with oh geez yeah you remember Ken Zha oh geez yep nope there is a oh my gosh holy crap there is a I guess yeah no they're all this is all pretty much like they're all former government dudes.
oh yeah, I mean that's the thing that they're talking about is Stephanie was most recently the director of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission's Division of Enforcement. So that's I mean they're
Stephanie Avakian, right?
yeah.
Who was she under when she was doing the SEC though? And also the SEC is such a
it's-
oh my
it's
gosh, the
saying
SEC is such a
she was the director of the SEC Division of Enforcement. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know who's been running the SEC under the Trump era, but it would have been whoever that was. Anyway, so
no,
yeah,
my feeling about it.
This is just more bullshit of like the company Activision Blizzard is not looking out for the people; they're looking out for themselves, and that just and you watched me process that in real time, or heard me process that in real time because that was the first time I was seeing this statement. It because again, it went live right before we started recording, so I pulled it and grabbed it, knowing we would talk about it. But yeah, it's again, I hate the fact that like my anger about this pales in comparison to the anger of the people who have been abused and hurt repeatedly over their entire careers in this industry because of shit like this. Like our response to this is nothing compared to those. So again, like go listen to those people, believe them when they say that this shit is a problem and has been a problem for many years. I mentioned her earlier in the show, Jackie Collins, I believe, has a great. Or if I didn't mention her, I'm mentioning her now. Jackie Collins, I believe at Jackie _ on Twitter or something like that. Maybe Jackie Collins _ but she has shared her own kind of experiences across the industry about like the bullshit she has dealt with in meetings and harassment and stuff like that. And, you know, again, she's out there knowing full well that this could blow back on her. And that sucks. That's fucking like disgusting. That people can and will be blacklisted because they've spoken out about this kind of stuff, either in the past or, you know, continuing. The other one I mentioned earlier, Share the Dev, she basically like wrote threads kind of like prefacing them with the idea of like, I know I'm never going to work in games again, so here's my story, or here's the story of like some of the people I know and you know, people who protected me crying in offices and stuff like that. Like it's devastating, those kinds of things. And like that HR has the facade of protecting the staff, but they're never protecting the staff. They are protecting the company. That is their job. I say that having attended HR specific training seminars of like, hey, you're a manager now. Here's what you need to know HR wise, to keep the company like in the clear. It's infuriating. So I don't know how much more I have to say on the matter. Anything you want to close this one out with, Cam?
Yeah, I do. This is like I mentioned earlier, like the thing I'm most upset about right now is that I'm too used to this. Like when last year in May, when I was thinking about leaving this industry altogether, part of why was a big part of why was because the Time's Up movement started and hit video games, and we saw so much stuff get pulled out from under the rugs, and like I was so broken down and disheartened over it, and now I see this, and it's happening to, like, there are real ramifications to people I know and people who have, and projects and things that I care about deeply, that I have an emotional attachment to. But my response to it is just a blanket acceptance that yes, this happened. Yep, it happened. Like I don't feel like there was never a moment of disbelief the moment I first saw the first sentence of that somebody wrote about this happening. I think like the first sentence of Jason Schreier's tweet, when he tweeted out the Bloomberg article, I immediately was just like, yep, this happened. Like, what happened? That happened? Okay, yeah, that happened. I believe it. Like, I'm so past the shock and the dismay to the point where this is, you have told me that this body has more infection that we have to cut out of it. Okay, let's cut it out. Like, I'm like, a part of me is also like, I'm done playing, I don't want to go out on saying anybody who's said anything about this out loud or publicly was using it as performative measures, so much more as it's like, I'm not going to be tweeting about my feelings about this on a regular basis, because they pale in absolute comparison to the suffering that others have dealt with. I like anything I can do to like promote and put this further out there and stand in support with the people who have been victims, and to support the people who are trying to make these changes happen with the walkout tomorrow, and everything else. Like, all I can do for that and support that, I will. But like, I know my place in this, and my place is not to be a voice. It's to be a bullhorn. It is to be I am here to amplify that voice. And if you feel, if you feel like talking out about it or reporting this to the government won't make a difference, I can't ever guarantee you that it will. There's a good chance, because of the way that this sort of stuff is so deeply ingrained into the absolute DNA of our culture, that it will continue to be a hard road and an uphill battle. But if you have experienced this, if you have seen something, we need to say something. Everyone needs to start taking these times to, if they see something, to say something, to stand up and make a difference. Because if we don't, nobody else will. Because it's clear leadership at these places and these organizations never will, unless we force them. That's where I kind of end on things.
Here. Well, I think we can probably wrap up the show rather than dive into a whole other topic. We had a second one. I will revert it to just being our shout out for this week. But I encourage people to check out an article over at GamesIndustry.biz entitled "Shawn Layden, Consolidation is the Enemy of Diversity." This is in response to Shawn Layden, basically former head of PlayStation. He was signed on as what is that new? I forget what his new title is. Oh, he's on the advisory board for the Streamline Media Group. And this interview with him, as well as some other people from Streamline, kind of made the rounds today. Obviously drowned out by the continuing saga of the Activision Blizzard stuff. But Shawn Layden is presenting an interesting perspective, again, after many, many years kind of as the head of PlayStation, coming out here and talking about the idea that games are getting too big and it's unsustainable. And it's not something new he kind of made headlines, I believe, last year or something for a similar kind of statement, but it's a deeper dive into kind of that philosophy and what the future of the industry is going to look like. In that regard, the idea, one of the quotes in there is this notion that you can't launch a $120 million game on a subscription service that's, I think he says $9.99, but if you want to like tie it to Xbox or something, that's $14.99 a month, Like the financial realities of that aren't going to pan out too well. So you need to, or you need a shit ton of subscribers to supplement that and help pay for it. So there's a it's an interesting read. Definitely check it out. Shawn Layden, I think, one of a very smart person within the industry. So his insight on these matters is, I think very relevant, and fascinating too. Kind of the broader story as a whole. I don't know what he will do in his new role. If he'll have a significant impact in changing or steering the industry moving forward, but it was an interesting kind of perspective from him. So check that out. The link will be in the description, all that stuff. I think that is going to do it. Again, fuck Activision Blizzard King. That's like, and our hearts go out to all affected by abuse and harassment there, as well as anywhere else in the industry. Certainly support the workers there that are trying to promote for change and work for change within in their walkout tomorrow or today as you're listening to this. If you listen to this the day it goes live, and yeah, that is gonna do it. So you can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give some love to there, Cam?
I do. I want to give some love to adjacent to Blizzard, Activision, King, the only real organization to come out and say anything has been Andbox, which is the parent organization of the New York Subliners, which is the Call of Duty League team, and the New York Excelsior. They have come out and put out a very strong condemnation statement and basically giving nothing but their full support to the people who are about to walk out, and call for actions of transparency. The only reason I bring that up is because they're the only ones to, as of recording this podcast, they're the only ones who have said anything, and it's very interesting to see all the organizations who went out big for Pride Month and went out big for this acclamation of diversity and positivity are absolutely silent right now. So yeah. This small statement echoes louder because of the silence of the other organizations, and quite honestly, it's disheartening and disgusting. So.
Mm-hmm. Very fair. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. The shout out I will give is I just want to reinforce the organizations that again are kind of the ones that the Activision Blizzard workers are supporting, that you can donate to, including Black Girls Code, Futures Without Violence, Girls Who Code, RAIN, Women in Animation, and Women in Games International. Support any of them. I will try and dig up any of their links, include those in the show notes as well. Because that's all of those organizations are doing something in relation to kind of this ongoing issue in the industry, and hopefully working to improve it and solve some of those issues. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please be angry about what you heard. This is not a thing to like, I guess. But in the normal outro rigmarole of these kinds of shows, rate, review, subscribe, and if you can, support us on Patreon. But if this was the one time you were thinking, you know what, I am gonna support those guys, fuck that. Put that money into any of those other organizations that I mentioned earlier. We will be fine without it. But thank you for listening. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to discuss this and talk about it. As always, stay nerdy, and for God's fucking sake, be good to each other.